You probably recognize this painting, right? I mean, it's super famous. This piece is. Oh, wait, hold on. Something's not quite right. I just need to adjust something here. Alright, that's better. Sorry about that. Wait, what? This piece is called Madame X by John Singer Sargent. This portrait was the painter's attempt at making a name for himself, but what seemed like an opportunistic move led John Singer Sargent to flee the country and destroyed the model's reputation forever. But why? What is it about this painting that caused so many problems? It all starts with the sitter, Virginie Amélie Avegno, born in Louisiana to Creole parents. Her father died in the Civil War, and after taking out loans to pay for their family plantation, her mother decided enough was enough and moved with her daughter to Paris. With the Civil War and the rest of their struggles behind them, you may think they felt relief. But Amélie was brought to Paris to be married, and that she did. She married Pierre Gautreau, a wealthy banker twice her age. She was considered a professional beauty, or someone who used their looks to progress through the ranks in society. She was striking and had many admirers. American expatriate Edward Simmons wrote, "I remember seeing her, the noted beauty of the day, and could not help stalking her as one does a deer. Her head and neck undulated like that of a young doe. Every artist wanted to make her in marble or paint." Ew. Even with this recognition, Gautreau struggled to make it into the upper echelon of Parisian society. Tabloids took minimal notice of her, and her status as a Creole woman held her back. Still, she and her mother were determined to get her name out there. Virginie Avegno Gautreau was known from afar for her hourglass figure, alabaster skin, elegance, and style. From the outside, it seemed like she had it all, but she always wanted more. She desired love and excitement, things that her husband simply couldn't give her. As a result, she was known to engage in extramarital affairs. One of her affairs was with Dr. Pozzi, a gynecologist who Sargent created a portrait of as well. Gautreau was no stranger to modeling and had many paintings done of her throughout her life. Sargent likely met her around 1882 and was determined to have her sit for one of his portraits, not for a commission, but so he could display it at the upcoming Paris Salon. He knew that a portrait of the socialite would garner much attention and hoped for a subsequent career boost. Virginie eventually agreed. They had a lot in common after all. They were both expatriates in their 20s, trying to climb the social ranks. But Sargent had no idea what he was getting himself into. Gautreau quickly became disillusioned by the idea of sitting for long periods of time. Between her conflicting social engagements, tending to her daughter, and responding to her full domestic staff, she grew weary and distracted by the process. Sargent described her in his writings the unpaintable beauty and hopeless laziness of Madame Gautreau. Although once he completed it, the painting turned out stunning. Gautreau leans against a table with her right hand, body facing forward and her head to the side. A pose that is present and assertive yet absent at the same time. She poses in a black satin dress with jeweled straps. Her cinch waist draws the eye down to her hand holding a black fan that almost disappears into her dress. A flash of white comes from her fourth finger, hinting at a wedding ring. Her pale skin contrasts with the dark brown, almost fluffy-looking background. The lavender powder on her skin is absent from her ear, making it quite pink, as if to reveal a piece of her hiding beneath her superficial persona. Her hairstyle is based on one of ancient Greece. The small tiara on her head in the shape of a crescent moon represents Diana, the Roman goddess of the hunt. Sargent chose to protect Gautreau's identity and didn't use her name, but instead titled the painting Portrait of Madame ... By the time the portrait was completed and hanging in the Paris Salon in 1884, people knew without a doubt that it was Virginie Avegno Gautreau, and they were furious. It was said that if you approached the piece at the art expedition, you would hear every curse word in the book. But why? Let me see. Where do I start? The pose was considered sensual and aloof, her neckline too low, revealing far too much skin. Her complexion was so ghostly that many speculated she was ingesting arsenic to lighten it. Worst of all, the initial portrait showed Gautreau's strap falling off her shoulder, tipping this painting into scandal territory. This is a photograph of Sargent's first attempt at the portrait. It really was the combination of the wedding ring and the bare shoulder that made this portrait too hot to handle. My goodness, how could a married woman give off such sensuality?
Yeah.
After talks with Gautreau's hysterical mother, Sargent repainted the strap to fit snugly on her shoulder. Unfortunately, the damage was already done at this point. The Times wrote about this portrait. Sargent is below his usual standard this year. The pose of the figure is absurd, and the bluish coloring atrocious. The features are so exaggerated that the natural delicacy of outline is entirely lost. Under Sargent's brush, the so-called beautiful subject looks like a mere caricature. Basically, this painting cemented Virginie Avignon-Gautreau's reputation as a loose woman, and John Singer Sargent was the painter of a loose woman, which apparently was almost just as bad. In the aftermath, Madame Gautreau remained in France, although many of her high-profile friends abandoned her. She had a couple more portraits commissioned that didn't cause near the stir of Sargent's, even though one of them was strikingly similar in style and pose. As she grew older, she lived apart from her husband, and it's not fully known what became of her. She died in 1915 in Cannes, France, at the age of 56. Sargent kept the portrait in his Paris studio and then brought it with him to London, where he fled after the scandal. He had a successful career later in his life in Britain and America, but never dared to make anything quite as bold again. In 1916, he sold the infamous painting to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, asking them to maintain the anonymity of the woman, and by this time he changed the title to Madame X. He left it saying, "I suppose it's the best thing I have ever done." So maybe it's actually wrong to say that this painting didn't succeed. In time, this is arguably his most famous masterpiece. Instead, maybe Sargent just happened to create Madame X in a world that wasn't quite ready for it yet. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.